All right, well, this week, a little controversy has erupted over sex ed in Palo Alto Unified. And here to talk about it is Elena Kadvany, education reporter. Elena, there's some parents who are kind of upset with the school district over a new curriculum that was debuted this year. You talked to them last night. What are their concerns?
So they're really primarily worried about the content of specific activities in the curriculum. They support sex education as a whole. They're not against that itself, but they feel like particular parts of this curriculum aren't appropriate for 12 and 13-year-old seventh graders, which is where this is being taught or has been taught this spring. It's just they're not at the age yet where they need to be talking about certain topics. And they've sort of pulled out some activities that mention underage drinking, non-consensual sex, and are really concerned about why this is being taught at the age it's being taught. And the reason it is because there's a new law that went into effect last year, the California Healthy Youth Act, that requires school districts to provide comprehensive sex ed once in middle school and once in high school. And there are various requirements around what the curriculum should include. And so this is really what drove this new curriculum being added into the middle schools this year.
Yeah, so the state already had sex ed requirements, but this was a revamped one to focus on greater inclusion for one thing, and then there's a focus on sort of healthy relationships, I think it's called.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Before, only really HIV prevention education was required, so this expanded on it, and it's not just about learning anatomy and how pregnancy works or teaching abstinence. It's a lot about healthy relationships and values around relationships and love and sex, and talking about gender norms and being really inclusive of modern, interpretations of relationships and sexual orientation.
More like informed choices.
Yeah, and it's really from the nonprofit that's offering it, called Health Connected. From their perspective, it's really about prevention. So if you mention things like underage drinking or something that might seem sort of off the radar for a seventh grader needing to know, it's not to plant the idea in their head to go off and do that night. It's to inform them about it and have them be able to talk about it in a safe environment before they might encounter it in real life and have sort of the information to make informed decisions. But for parents, it's they don't see it as preventative. They see it as sort of promotional of risky behaviors.
Yeah, I saw some of the illustrations, and so what the nonprofit Health Connected that's developed this curriculum is trying to do is to have illustration scenarios. Let's read over Eric's choices. Let's read over Nina's situation, and then have the kids talk about it.
Yeah, and these specific scenarios have been a point of contention with parents, and they are actually part of an optional activity that most students in Palo Alto have not even done. But there are these scenarios about teenagers' first sexual experiences, and they're actually from real teenagers. And so there's ones about, a girl figuring out that maybe she likes girls, or a girl being at a party and drinking alcohol and being taken advantage of. They're not part of the core curriculum, but they are included in there. And then there's sort of all these questions that the kids go through about determining, do you think that they were ready to do whatever they did? And most of the answers end up being no, they weren't.
So age appropriate, and that's a really kind of hot button area, because I know parents have certain ideas of what their kids are ready for. Do we have a sense of who's determining what is age appropriate for these?
I don't. I haven't read the entire law, but it does mention it has to be age appropriate, which is totally subjective. I think some parents would be okay with their seventh grader talking about certain topics, and others clearly aren't. And the parents I spoke with last night recognize that, but they feel like there are enough parents who feel like this isn't appropriate, that the school district should do something about it.
Now, this isn't the only school district that's wrestling with sex ed. Cupertino got in the news this week because of a Board of Education decision. They were split, actually.
2-2.
Yeah, on adopting this particular curriculum in their schools.
And that's really what sparked the parent outcry in Palo Alto. There was a board meeting in Cupertino in late March, just before spring break in Palo Alto, and people saw that, started talking about it. Apparently online chat boards
they were lit up.
Yeah, and the school board started getting emails, and there was also a petition in Cupertino, so parents here, I think, decided to follow suit and do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the organization itself that they picked, can you talk a little bit about them? It sounds like they were already vetted, or their program was reviewed actually by the state and got high marks when they looked at 11 different programs regarding sex education.
So Health Connected is a nonprofit, and they're based in Redwood City. They've been around since the 1980s, doing sex education and training. For several years, they've trained high school teachers in Palo Alto and district nurses, but this was the first time that they did anything in the middle schools. And they are in 13 other school districts in the Bay Area. They're a pretty well-established organization. And like you said, so that there's no state-recommended sex ed curriculum, and that's done on purpose because they know that communities might want to choose something that fits for their needs, or maybe they have specific issues. One community might have really high teen pregnancy rates and another one might not, or whatever it is. So, but the state did do this compliance review of 11 different curriculum, including Health Connected's, and identified, they were called major, it wasn't issues, but either major or minor things that needed to be remedied. And Health Connected had no major issues with its curriculum, but there were minor modifications that they had to do, and they've said that they have made those changes. And that review is posted on Health Connected websites for anyone to see.
So one thing that I'm really interested in is the process by which it was adopted in Palo Alto, because obviously in Cupertino, the school board was involved. They took a vote. How come Palo Alto's school board didn't vote on it? How come there were no other curricula that were entertained by the administration before adopting this one?
And I think even in Cupertino, there was a task force that worked for several months and recommended teen talk. So even with that whole process, there were still parents who were upset about it. And here, what I've talked with Superintendent Max McGee about it is he said sort of, you know, they needed to get to legal compliance. This is not a full curriculum. It's done over 2 or 3 weeks. It's 8 to 10 hours of instruction. There are no grades associated with it, no formal textbook. So he didn't believe board approval or any sort of rigorous process like that was necessary, but it was vetted by, he said, the school principals and the chief academic officers. But I think it seems like since they had an existing relationship with Health Connected, and Health Connected is an established organization who does this curriculum already, it seemed like an easy decision just to put it in place for this year to be in compliance. And they are seeking feedback about it, and it doesn't sound like they're definitely not going to change anything for this year, but they'll figure out what might work best for next year.
Yeah, well, it's already been rolled out in 2 of the middle schools, and they're in the middle. They're just finishing up.
Yeah, it already happened at JLS and Dremann, and they're almost done at Jordan.
Yeah, and how much is this costing the district to have this curriculum for this year?
The contract with Health Connected is about $55,000, I think, and it's just a 1-year contract, so it doesn't commit them to more than just this year at this point.
So tell me a little bit more about the meeting that you had last night with the parents. Who were they, and what did they raise as their chief concerns? I know you touched upon some of those already, but what are they hoping out of this petition that they have a petition that 1,200 people have signed?
So they're not just from middle school. There's parents from JLS and I believe Jordan. And at this point, they recognize that it's already gone through with most schools. They have asked that the district stop the curriculum immediately, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen.
Well, they can't either, right? I mean, because under state law, they have to provide it.
Yeah. They plan on showing up at next Tuesday's board meeting to talk about this, so they're not going anywhere. And they sent a letter to the superintendent and the board on Monday that at the very end mentioned that they would pursue legal action if they didn't get the response that they were looking for from the district. So I asked them about that last night. They said it's something they are looking into. And I asked if they had met with an attorney, if they had gone that far, and they said that we don't have to answer that question. It sounded like that they had. But they're really serious about this not happening again next year. They recognize that maybe it's a little bit too late for some of their students who've gone through it already this year. But
they have an opt-out option. So
they
don't
think
have
so.
to.
They think they said that's not an option for us because we want our kids to be educated about these topics. It's not like we're against sex ed, but and they were sort of offended that they were encouraged to do that because they feel like it is their right to have some sort of education.
And can they do that? This is sort of modular, right? That's my understanding in terms of how this whole class is laid out. So
Yeah, it builds on itself. So if you opted out of one part and then came back, it could be sort of confusing for the student.
I see.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so a modular opt-out isn't possible, or
They
just
could
not
do it,
They
but it's not
can opt
recommended.
out. They can. You can opt out of some or all.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, the nonprofit said sort of it wouldn't be best for a student to just leave for part of it and then come back.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, jumping into the kind of the parents' point of view for seventh graders, when I looked at the curriculum, I saw there was 300 pages. It seemed awfully comprehensive, and I know that comprehensive was a key phrase
Yeah.
in the California Healthy Young Act. But I just wonder how, if you've got 12 sessions over 10 hours for 2 weeks, maybe that's just a little bit too much at that age. I mean, is there a way to approach these topics, these many topics, which are very important and people agree on, in maybe more of an abbreviated way for that age, and then, when kids are older in high school to broach?
Yeah, I'm sure that's something that Health Connected has considered. I mean, they've been doing this for many years, so, and maybe since there are these new legal requirements, everyone's sort of erring on the side of being safe.
Sure.
But there is a point about, what, obviously it's good for kids of this age to talk about these issues, but there probably is sort of a limit of what a seventh grader can think about and discuss versus, a sophomore or junior in high school. And I think that they're aware of that, and they are the experts in this. And it's also worth mentioning that Palo Alto has taught sex ed for a long time. It's not like this has never happened before. It's just the introduction of an outside agency coming in and doing this very targeted curriculum.
Yeah. I mean, I think also from the parent perspective, some of the topics that kids may be exploring, compromising situations that they'll find themselves in, I would assume that the parents think my kid isn't thinking about that. I know that the petition website was saying, is this encouraging them to think about ideas that they hadn't thought about it before?
Yeah.
And is that detrimental to my child or not?
Yeah, I mean, they really see it as
Pretty classic.
encouraging behaviors that kids of that age might not even, they think, be exposed to or be thinking about.
Yeah.
And as I said, I think the whole idea of doing that is that you do it before they're caught in one of those
Before it
situations. They
happens,
don't
yeah.
know what to do.
Well, I think that's what Health Connections was also saying when they wrote their FAQ. That they actually said, people say, well, they're 12 years old, we shouldn't be having these discussions, and they basically were saying, but even though we make an assumption that they're not having sex, they are engaging in some sorts of behaviors that may lead to this, or there's a gap certainly between the age of 12 and let's say 17.
Yeah.
So in those years, some things may be happening, and they want them to be prepared for whatever might happen.
And some of the activities, I mean, the way the curriculum is structured, if you look at it, not every single class is going to do every single activity and ask every single question that's in there. It's up to the educator in the classroom, along with the teacher, supposedly, to sort of figure out, maybe this class is more mature and they seem really open, so let's broach some of these harder questions, or maybe this is a quiet class who doesn't seem really ready, so let's focus on some things that might be more comfortable for them. So they're supposed to sort of adapt it to what's going on in the classroom at the time.
Is there going to be an evaluation component at the end of the curriculum for the students to give feedback? Is there going to be sort of a touch base with the district, with the teachers?
The district says that they're going to seek feedback from students, teachers, and parents. I'm not sure how yet, but they have said that they're going to collect feedback and then use it to inform what they do next year.
Isn't that also a state requirement? I think there is something in there as well, that they are supposed to have some sort of evaluation component.
I'm sure there is, yeah. They can't just drop in there and,
Yeah.
and leave without knowing what happened, yeah.
And nobody knows what they told those kids. So
Yeah. Does the curriculum encourage parent-teen conversation?
Yes, yeah, that's another part of it. Pretty explicitly, I forget the words they use, but just encouraging the parent as someone that the kids can go to talk about these things. There's a homework assignment called the parent interview, and they're sent home with a list of questions about sex-related topics that they're supposed to talk with their parents about. One of the parents I met with last night said his 7th grade son came home and he asked him sort of how it was, and his son said, I didn't really pay attention, I don't know. And he thought maybe he was avoiding talking about it, which is hard to, you don't know if that's attributed to because
He's a 7th grader.
yeah, exactly. But they do feel like the parents were saying, in 7th grade, they do feel, a lot of kids are still more open to talk with their parents or see their parents in a different light than a high schooler. So they were also worried about that.
I wanted to just mention now that so the Chinese American community in Palo Alto has seemingly kind of taken hold of this issue. There were some materials that you said were translated into Chinese written so that the other community members could understand this fully. Are you seeing a great presence, whether on the petition or in the group that you met with, or of the ethnic Chinese Palo Alto residents?
3 of the parents I met with last night out of 5 were Chinese American. They were very adamant that it's not just about their community or about a particular ethnic group, and family values across many different groups have different interpretations of if this is appropriate or not. But and it does seem, one of them said that it started within the Chinese parent community over spring break, and they were some of the people who started the petition.
Well, I think one thing that's interesting is just that various cultures have cultural norms, and that I don't think that should be discounted necessarily in conversations. That although we are all Americans, we come with our own identities and backgrounds, and like you were saying before we started the webcast, your heritage comes from the old country in part that's passed along through parents and grandparents.
Yeah. Well, there are just let's say moral values that people are going to pass down and have expectations that their children will follow those. And then if you have, that may break down from, let's say, from my parents' generation and what they tried to impart to me to what I might impart to my children, and so on and so forth. But it does exist, and so that's and some of these cultures are going to be some, and it doesn't even matter within cultures. People are just going to be opposed on religious grounds or just anything to some of the sex acts that they're talking about, or even the relationships that they're talking about. Does that mean that they aren't taught? No, I don't think you can just avoid that and say, well, I don't want my child exposed to anything that has to do with homosexuality or even suggests homosexuality, which one of the examples that the parents pulled out, actually 2 of the examples had to do with homosexual relationships, right? Same gender relationships. So I don't know, how do you deal with something like that? How do you get around that?
It's an interesting thing to have a diverse community, celebrate the diverse community, but yet have all those parts of the community come together to try to figure out one curriculum for everybody. And you're bringing in education and the expertise of educators as well. And it seems like a conversation to have. Really. And whether the district had to get into compliance, that's one thing, but having a conversation seems like a healthy thing.
The other thing that was interesting is the state law apparently forbids teaching abstinence.
Abstinence only.
Abstinence
It's
only.
included in the curriculum.
Abstinence
They are
only.
supposed to include.
Oh, sorry. Let's make that clarification.
Let's not let that get out there.
Well, you can't be dogmatic and just say we're only going to teach abstinence and nothing else.
Yes. Yeah.
So but it is an option as well that's going to be offered then.
And they do talk about abstinence, in the curriculum.
Yeah, there's a curriculum component there. Okay. Any other? So on Tuesday, the board's going to be meeting, and parents are pledging to show up.
Yeah, it's not on the agenda, but I think that they want to show up in force and make their concerns heard and seen. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for this robust discussion, and we'll see what happens next week. That's a wrap for this week's Behind the Headlines. If you like what you hear and you want to subscribe to our webcast, just click the button below, or you can like us as always. Go to paloaltoonline.com to keep up on Palo Alto's news. And if you want to talk about this issue, go to paloaltoonline.com/square for Town Square, the community discussion forum. That's it for this week.